Moving further afield, Iran spurned US President Donald Trump's call for a new nuclear pact, and a commander threatened more attacks after both sides appeared to back off from intensified conflict following the US killing of an Iranian general and Tehran's retaliatory missile strikes. Concern that the Middle East was primed for a wider war eased after President Trump gave an address on Wednesday that refrained from ordering more military action. But each side's next move in this protracted shadow war is unclear. Pope Francis said that the tensions risked compromising the gradual process of rebuilding in Iraq, as well as setting the groundwork for a vaster conflict that all of us would want to avert. Meanwhile, a book of condolences has been opened at the Embassy of Iran in Pretoria. Now, for some analysis on the situation in Iran, we're now joined by Elizabeth Sidiropoulos, who's the CEO of the South African Institute of International Relations. Thanks so much for joining us on this particular story, and one I think people are busy trying to make sense of. Yesterday, we saw Donald Trump issue that statement, which was much anticipated overnight after those missile strikes by the Iranians into Iraq. And I just wonder what your make of President Trump's statement is.
Well, I think it's been a bit of a mixture that, on the one hand, an attempt at de-escalation, but also on the other hand, threatening more economic sanctions, and we have yet to see what that will be. And at the same time, also saying that, you know, your campaign of terror, murder, mayhem, I think he said a little later, will not be tolerated any longer. So I think it's these mixed messages which one should be extremely concerned about, because it also makes it very difficult for different actors, not just the one immediately on the other side of the table, to actually have any sense of a greater certainty about the genuine desire to de-escalate or not. The America's I certainly have sent a message to that effect, that it's important to de-escalate. But at the same time, I think the statement yesterday by Britain, France and Germany sort of highlighted the role that Iran was playing in escalating the tensions, rather than also the fact that there is a great deal of responsibility that actually lies with the US, not just, by the way, with the assassination of Soleimani, but that this has actually been a ratcheting up of tensions and pressure. The nuclear deal that was negotiated in 2015.
All right, we'll talk about the nuclear deal just now, but I'm just wondering, yesterday we heard President Trump saying that the Iranians had backed down, and I'm just wondering, did the United States also not back down after all the tough talk before, or was this perhaps the best way to save face for both sides?
Well, I don't believe that either side wants to end up in a conventional war. I think certainly the Iranians know that should that be provoked, that they would be in a very difficult situation against the US. And I think certainly President Trump, in an election year and a president who has often said that it's important to bring back the troops from the Middle East, and has asked his allies also to take on more of these responsibilities across the world. And certainly Trump doesn't want to walk into war. The difficulty with this kind of sort of brinkmanship, of course, is that they might very well end up in a situation where, from a losing face perspective, both sides end up having to do things that they might not have would not have rationally actually decided to act. This is the So in some senses, both sides, both looking at, for example, the Iranian foreign minister's tweet yesterday about taking proportionate action, about the fact that there were no casualties in both of the bases where the missiles were sent, as well as President Trump's ambivalent statements yesterday indicate an attempt to sort of be very careful about how they come across in their public statements. But I think this game is still a long way from ending.
All right. So perhaps no military incursions lined up for going forward, but sanctions certainly are going to hurt Iran. President Trump partly said he's ready to talk and negotiate and come to some solution with Iran, but at the same time making threats and ratcheting up sanctions there. And some would say that sanctions would hurt far many more people inside Iran than maybe a couple of military raids, so that actually Iran's probably worse off.
Yes, well, let's not forget, of course, that economic sanctions have been ratcheted up since the US pulled out of the nuclear deal. So this has been sort of something that has been playing itself out over the last couple of years. I think there are already significant American sanctions against Iran, and the related effect of that, of course, is that it's become also very difficult for the countries that continue to be part of the nuclear agreement, namely the Europeans and, of course, the Russians and the Chinese, to actually continue to honor their commitments under the nuclear agreement because of the dollar being the reserve currency of the world. And there have been attempts, of course, by the Europeans to establish an instrument in support of trade exchanges and non-US denominated currencies, but that hasn't really been very, very useful. So the impact on Iran has already been quite significant. We'll wait to see what new announcements will come out of the Treasury in this regard. But absolutely, from an economic perspective, I think Iran has been in a difficult spot for a couple of years.
Okay, perhaps a final question. I don't know how quickly you can answer this one. So UN Security Council meeting today, and one of those things surely will be the situation in Iran. And the question now becomes, some people might even point to President Trump trying to undo everything that Obama did, including that 2015 nuclear deal. US allies want to stick with the deal, but President Trump is almost forcing them to try and think about moving away from it. How will they resolve this?
Well, I think it's the resolution is de facto on the ground already playing itself out. It's Iran since the US pulled out of the deal has been breaking out of its commitments to the nuclear deal incrementally. I think we're seeing that accelerate since the killing of Soleimani, and I think the Europeans in particular, while I think remaining committed to the concept and the significance of the nuclear deal, are finding themselves increasingly in a situation where I think the deal is collapsing before them, and I think that's the greatest tragedy of what we've seen play out over the last couple of days. And I think it's really unlikely that under these circumstances and in the short term, that Iran is going to be willing to sit at a table to negotiate a new deal, which the Americans would want to include, issues of missiles and the role of Iran in the region and its alliances with proxy organizations and so on and so forth. So I'm afraid I think the JCPOA is going through is probably nearing its expiry date.
All right, Elizabeth, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. That was the CEO of the South African Institute of International Relations, Elizabeth Sidiropoulos, joining us on Skype from Johannesburg.